My name is Linda Carter. I'm 67 years old, a widow, living in Seattle. I thought I had already survived the hardest storms life could throw at me, but nothing prepared me for the moment my hands began to shake over a glowing phone screen in my quiet kitchen. The sound of the kettle whistling filled the air, but I barely heard it. My fingers trembled so badly, I nearly dropped my phone onto the tile floor. Staring back at me were sun-soaked photos of my son Ryan and his wife Brooke. They were lounging on the deck of a gleaming yacht, the Mediterranean sky stretching endless blue behind them. Laughter frozen in pixels, champagne glasses in hand. 3 weeks earlier, I had wired them $13,000. Ryan had told me men were coming after him, that debt collectors were threatening his family. I believed him. A mother always wants to believe her child. I told myself I'd rather tighten my own belt than see my son in danger. But in that instant, staring at Brooke's diamond-studded smile, I felt my chest tighten. Betrayal doesn't come with a warning. It just crashes through you, leaving you gasping, hollow, ashamed you were so blind. That morning, in my Seattle kitchen, I realized my love had been turned into an ATM, and this is the story of how I found the strength to take my dignity back. But first, let me tell you about my family, who they were, and how we got here. After the shock of that morning, I need to tell you about the world I was living in. My anchor, the one person who keeps me steady, is my dear friend Diane Miller. She's the kind of woman who sees things clearly, without the haze of emotion that so often clouds my vision. When I get swept up in feelings, Diane reminds me of the ground under my feet. And then there's my family. My son Ryan, when he was younger, he had this warmth about him, a gentleness that made me proud. He used to come over just to fix a leaky faucet or sit on the porch with me, talking about nothing at all. But over the years, that softness seemed to harden. My daughter-in-law, Brooke, is striking, always polished, always commanding attention. She has an edge to her, sharp enough to make me feel like I should tread carefully around her. When my husband passed, I received a modest inheritance. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give me a sense of security in my old age. Strangely, that money became a shadow between us. What should have been a cushion turned into a wedge, stirring quiet tensions that I didn't want to admit were there. I was lonely after losing my husband, vulnerable. And when Ryan came to me, needing me, it felt like a lifeline. But I would learn being needed doesn't always mean being loved. And maybe that's where it all began. With a dream I once held close, my Italy dream. For 2 years, I carried a little dream like a candle I refused to let go out. Italy. Not just as a tourist with a checklist, but as a woman proving to herself that life wasn't finished just because she wore the title of widow. I mapped it all out. September in Rome, wandering cobblestone streets with a camera slung around my neck. A few days in Florence, tracing the brushstrokes of the masters. Down to Amalfi, to feel the sea spray against my skin. And then Tuscany, where I imagined sipping wine at sunset with golden hills rolling out like a painting. I was careful. Every month, I set aside a little, even when it meant skipping dinners out or mending old clothes instead of buying new ones. Slowly, it added up. I bought a sturdy suitcase, a camera I had dreamed of using, and I tucked my plane tickets into a folder that I opened and reopened just to feel the joy. This was my one indulgence, my way of saying to myself, you're still here, and you deserve to live. Of course, not everyone understood. Brooke gave me one of her cool little smiles, saying maybe I should think of something more practical. Ryan didn't say much. but his silence spoke louder than any words. I remember one evening, standing in my bedroom, my hand resting on the handle of that new suitcase. The weight of it wasn't just fabric and zippers, it was freedom, dignity, proof that I could still choose joy. I didn't know then how quickly that dream would be tested, or how easily love could be twisted into guilt. And it began with a phone call that shattered everything. The phone rang late in the afternoon, the kind of call that makes your stomach twist before you even answer. It was Ryan. His voice trembled, uneven, as though he was trying not to break down. He told me Brooke had gotten tangled up in something awful, money borrowed, men at the door, threats hanging in the air. He said they were scared, that the debt collectors were dangerous, and I could almost hear his breath catching between words. My first thought was disbelief. Brooke, debt collectors. It didn't add up, and yet the panic in his tone dug into me, pulling me under. He said the amount they needed was urgent, that it had to be paid immediately, or things could spiral. When he said the number, my heart sank. 13,000. The exact sum I had set aside for Italy. For a split second, I wondered if it was coincidence or if fate was mocking me. My trip, my freedom, all weighed against my son's safety. Logic told me to pause, to ask questions, but logic didn't stand a chance against the sound of my son's desperation. I opened my banking app with hands that shook so badly, I almost dropped the phone. Step by step, I moved the money. Every keystroke felt like chiseling away at my own dream, but I told myself dreams could wait. Family came first. When it was done, I sat staring at the confirmation screen. A strange mix of emotions flooded me. Pride that I could protect them. Relief that the danger might be over. But beneath it all, a quiet unease settled in my chest, whispering that something wasn't right. I pushed it aside. I had done the right thing. At least, that's what I needed to believe. I was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling aimlessly, when my thumb froze. A familiar face popped up. Brooke. Her profile glittered with new photos, each one brighter, louder, more glamorous than the last. My breath caught as I tapped the first picture. Brooke on the deck of a gleaming cruise ship, glass of champagne raised high, the ocean stretching behind her like endless silk. I told myself maybe it was old, maybe from before. But then I saw the timestamp yesterday. The next photo cut even deeper. Ryan, my son, leaning back in a deck chair, the sun painting his face gold. He looked relaxed, carefree, not like a man hounded by debt collectors. I scrolled faster. Images blurred together. Brooke in a sequined dress under neon lights. Ryan laughing beside her at a midnight buffet. Captions bragging about sunsets over the Mediterranean. Hashtags screamed planning and anticipation. Bucket list. Mediterranean magic. Dream vacation. This wasn't survival. This wasn't desperation. This had been in the works for weeks. I felt my stomach knot. $13,000 gone from my account, traded for their cruise tickets and cocktails. My Italy trip dissolved into the seafoam of their luxury escape. The betrayal seared hot, sharper than anything I'd felt since losing my husband. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The trusting mother who would sacrifice everything without question was gone. What replaced her was a woman staring hard at the screen, piecing together lies, and burning with the need for answers. I closed the app with shaking fingers, my heart pounding, not with fear this time, but with suspicion. And that suspicion was about to become my compass. I opened Brooke's profile again. This time, not as a wounded mother, but as an investigator. Every photo, every caption became a piece of evidence. I began taking screenshots, one by one, creating a folder on my laptop I labeled in silence proof. At first, it felt intrusive, like snooping where I didn't belong, but the deeper I went, the more it turned into something else, an obligation to myself. Dates lined up in a way that made my chest tighten. The day Ryan had called me, voice-breaking, begging for help that same night Brooke had posted from the ship's deck, glass in hand, glowing under Mediterranean skies. I scrolled back further. Posts from weeks before hinted at excitement, a photo of cruise tickets artfully arranged on a marble counter. A suitcase tagged with words like "Adventure awaits" and "Dream trip." These weren't impulsive snapshots. They were breadcrumbs leading back months, proof of a vacation carefully planned and proudly broadcasted to the world. I found myself almost clinical, comparing timestamps, matching the cruise's itinerary with the timeline of my supposed rescue mission. Each match felt like a knife turning, but it also sharpened my resolve. This wasn't carelessness. It wasn't even desperation. By the time I closed the laptop, the truth had hardened inside me. The call, the panic, the pleas, it had all been staged. Not an accident, not a mistake, a deliberate act. And the most chilling part wasn't losing the money. It was realizing my own son had helped write the script. This was a plan all along. One evening, with the glow of my laptop screen lighting up the kitchen, I decided to check my online banking. I told myself it was routine, but deep down, I was already bracing. The scrolling numbers confirmed what my heart dreaded, thousands drained in a pattern too precise to be coincidence. Cruise line tickets, high-end restaurants, luxury boutiques scattered across Mediterranean ports. The receipts told their own story, one of indulgence and champagne, not desperation or danger. Every charge sat neatly within the exact timeline of their so-called emergency. My Italy fund, years of saving, was now written across someone else's holiday ledger. Not long after, Ryan sent me his explanation. He wrote about gambling, about losing control, about debts he hadn't meant to pile up. It was presented as shameful, almost rehearsed, like a confession tailored to soften a blow. For a brief moment, I wanted to believe him, because believing meant holding on to the son I thought I knew. But the dates didn't lie. Casinos weren't charging for fine dining on the Amalfi Coast. Gambling debts didn't align perfectly with cruise ship itineraries. His story was nothing more than a mask, a clumsy cover laid over a far uglier truth. That realization landed heavier than any credit card statement. It wasn't just the theft, it was the premeditation. My own son had looked me in the eye, planned a story, and counted on me to fold under the weight of motherly love. The pain was sharp, but beneath it, something steadier rose. A clarity I hadn't felt since before widowhood. If they could rehearse lies, then I could prepare my truth. I wasn't going to let my love be twisted into weakness again. This time, I would be ready. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every lie, every missing dollar, every smile that now felt rehearsed. For the first time, though, I wasn't crying. I was planning. On the kitchen table, I spread out my evidence. Screenshots of Brooke's glowing cruise photos. Bank statements lined with charges that matched every port of call. A timeline I had written out in neat rows, showing exactly when Ryan called me begging for help while he was already sipping wine at sea. It looked less like my private pain and more like a case file. I told myself this time would be different. I wouldn't beg for respect or plead for the truth. I would demand accountability, calmly, firmly, and with everything documented. No raised voice, no shaky hands, just facts laid bare. I called Diane the next morning. She listened, steady as ever, reminding me I wasn't alone. Her voice anchored me, but the strength had to come from inside. And it did. By afternoon, I was drafting papers in agreement for repayment and a new version of my will that no longer assumed unconditional trust. The pen moved slowly but decisively, each stroke a boundary I should have drawn years ago. For once, fear loosened its grip. I felt steady, even ready. I folded the papers, placed them neatly in a folder, and sat back in my chair. Tomorrow, I would walk into their house not as a desperate mother, but as a woman who finally refused to be used. I wasn't scared anymore. I was prepared. I walked up the steps to their house with the folder tucked firmly under my arm. That house had once felt like an extension of mine, warm, full of Sunday dinners and laughter. But as the door opened, the air inside felt different, colder, defensive. Brooke crossed her arms almost instantly, her posture sharp, her eyes already daring me to back down. Ryan shifted in the doorway, uneasy, his smile forced and thin. I sat at their dining table, the same one where I had once fed him as a boy, and laid the folder on the wood like a line drawn in sand, piece by piece. I spread out the evidence, screens glowing with cruise photos, bank statements marked with charges, a timeline carefully written in my own hand. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tremble. I spoke slowly, measured, like someone who had rehearsed every step of this. Inside, though, my heart ached. To look my own son in the eye and present proof of his deceit was like pulling apart my own ribs. Brooke smirked, a dismissive curl of her lips, as if none of it mattered. Ryan fumbled, trying to string together explanations, his words stumbling under the weight of what I laid before them. And I held my ground. No tears, no pleading, just the quiet steel of a mother who had finally drawn her line. The silence after I finished was heavier than anything I had ever felt. They looked at me differently, not as someone they could twist, but as someone who would no longer bend. For the first time, the balance in that house had shifted, and in that long, tense pause, I knew the deeper truth was about to surface. Brooke leaned back in her chair, her smirk widening as if my evidence meant nothing. She brushed it off with a tone that dripped with arrogance, reframing everything I had laid out. To her, the money wasn't stolen, it was just an advance on inheritance, as if my savings, my sacrifices, my years of discipline already had her name written on them. Her words cut sharper than any lie they had told before. This wasn't fear of collectors or a desperate mistake. This was entitlement. This was ownership. And the cruelest part wasn't her smugness, it was Ryan's silence. He sat there, eyes down, shoulders heavy, but he didn't speak. He didn't defend me. He didn't stop her. In that moment, I realized his silence was its own confession. The ache in my chest was unbearable. For years, I believed I was needed as a mother. Now I saw the truth. To them, I was a balance sheet, not a woman, not a widow trying to stand tall again, but a bank account with legs. And yet, in that icy clarity, something inside me hardened. If they thought my love meant limitless access, they were about to learn otherwise. The will would be rewritten. Repayment would be demanded. I sat there, steady, already sketching the lines of a different future. One where I was no longer their silent safety net. One where I chose the terms. I walked out of that confrontation not with rage burning in my chest, but with a steadiness I hadn't felt in months. The tears that once blurred my vision had dried, replaced by a kind of calm I could trust. I had given them every chance to respect me. Now it was my turn to set the rules. That night, I drafted the repayment agreement, line by line. I wrote out the amount, the terms, the deadlines. It wasn't just paper. It was a boundary carved in ink. No more vague promises, no more manipulation. If they wanted my trust again, they would have to earn it, dollar by dollar. The next morning, I walked into my lawyer's office. The air smelled faintly of leather and old books, grounding me. With quiet certainty, I instructed him to amend my will. Ryan and Brooke were removed. My legacy would not be a reward for entitlement. Instead, it would go to people and causes that would honor it, not squander it. It wasn't revenge. It was respect. Respect for myself, for the years I spent building what I had, and for the love I still carried, even if it had been bruised. For the first time in a long while, I felt like my life was mine again. The fear that had haunted me had no place left to hide. And as I left that office, documents in hand, I knew the storm had shifted. What came next would be quieter, more reflective, but no less important. The days after my decision felt strangely still. Ryan and Brooke withdrew, their silence filling the space where calls and visits once lived. I felt the sting of that distance, sharper than I care to admit. A mother always hopes her child will come back, softer, wiser. But I knew better now. My house felt quieter. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards at night, these sounds became my company. At first, the emptiness weighed heavy. I missed the warmth of Ryan's laughter, the easy comfort of knowing I was needed. Yet, beneath the ache, there was peace. A clean kind of silence, not the suffocating hush of secrets and lies. I began to understand something I had ignored for too long. Boundaries don't erase love. They preserve it, protect it from being twisted into something unrecognizable. Saying no was not cruelty, it was dignity. And dignity, I realized, is as much a gift to myself as it is a lesson for those who tested me. I sat by the window one evening, watching the Seattle rain blur the glass, and felt the weight lift. Pain and peace, side by side. And in that stillness, I knew my story wasn't ending. It was only shifting toward the lesson I needed to share. Family is supposed to be a place of trust, of love, of refuge. But I learned the hard way that even the deepest ties can be poisoned when respect is absent. What my son and his wife took from me was not only money, it was faith. The faith that I was more than a wallet, more than a safety net. For a while, I blamed myself. I thought maybe my loneliness blinded me. Maybe my need to feel needed made me easy to use. But I see it differently now. Protecting my dignity was not selfish. It was survival. It was a reminder that love without respect is no love at all. I want you to hear me clearly. Setting boundaries does not mean you stop caring. It means you refuse to let your care be twisted into weakness. It means you value yourself enough to demand better. My story is personal, but the lesson is universal. We all deserve relationships built on honesty and respect, not entitlement and deceit. And if you've ever felt used in the name of love, know this: you are allowed to say no. If this story touched you, share it. If it made you think of your own family, leave a comment. And if you believe in protecting dignity, tap that like button. Your voice matters just like mine.